So, good morning. Thanks for checking this out. I appreciate it. Um, I'm doing this because I'm tired of waking up between 3 and 4 o'clock every morning with this spiritual feeling, hey, it's time to start making a podcast, which is the last thing I want to do. As a lot of people know, I've told people if I ever start doing a podcast, that means that I have failed as a writer. And I don't feel like I've failed as a writer. Um, I do think America's failed to create a nation of readers. And everybody seems to be graduating or devolving to video and podcasts and being told things as opposed to reading things for themselves. So here I am. Well, whatever. I'm not going to digress too much there. Maybe I'll do another video on that at some point. But what I am here to do is to try to do some short videos, 10 minutes or less. I mean, I don't want to do long videos. And I'm not going to go into great detail about stuff. I'm just going to kind of tell you what I've figured out over my 63 years as a former theology scholarship student who ended up getting a film degree and has worked in Hollywood and has hung out with the occultist types and wannabes and has gotten the tap twice and turned it down twice. I don't know what happens if they do it a third time and I turn it down. I don't know what that means exactly, and hopefully I don't have to make that decision at some point. And so other things maybe I'll do a video on why you should listen to me more than most other people, and why you should also not trust me even if you do listen to me, because of course I am flawed as everybody else. Although I will say that I'm not going to try to deliberately mislead anybody. But I might be wrong about stuff. I'm only human, and I do have 6 decades worth of corrupt societal programming to deal with. And I think I've transcended a lot of it, but obviously not all of it, because nobody can, and we're all born with sin, or we've all at least sinned throughout our lives. Whatever, that's another digression. So I'm going to give you my take on things, and I'm going to tell you, didn't pull this stuff out of my butt. This is years and years of hearing kind of the same thing over and over again from people who are smart and who I trust. And just real quick, this is the way the world is run, as I've perceived from the teachings of and lectures and conversations and all that sort of thing. First, in the early 1980s, from my theology scholarship professor Thaddeus Gerdak, who was one of the smartest people that I've ever met, as well as being morbidly obese, so fat. I mean, he ended up dying of a heart attack while lecturing at the creepy West Virginia college where I had my theology scholarship, before transferring to a much bigger school where I got a film degree. That's another digression. But anyway, Thaddeus Gerdak, he was the first one to say this. Second was my boss, George Whitman, at Shakespeare and Company in Paris, where I lived in 1985. And I was living actually in the rare book room there, which had all sorts of books that are easy to get now, but were not easy to get then, by Aleister Crowley, and a bunch of Freemason books that nobody was supposed to have, and a couple private diaries, and just all this weird stuff that was back there. Really blew my mind and opened it as well. So that's two. Third person would be Chris Whitman. Sorry, Chris Milligan. Chris Milligan is the son of a CIA officer who later, Chris went on to launch Trine Day Books, which you should know about if you don't. Trine Day is in the Pacific Northwest, and they publish books that nobody else will. They've got all the Anthony Sutton books. They've got the Sinister Forces books, by Peter Levenda, who is a guy I wouldn't trust at all, but I would read because he's very smart, and there are a lot of truths mixed in with his subversions. So Chris Milligan was the third. The fourth one would be Mark Passio. Mark Passio is a former Satanist, or at least he tells us he's a former Satanist. He also tells us he's still on their membership ranks and they won't remove him. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I will tell you, if I'm to believe the biblical passage that you will know people by their fruits, I think Mark Passio has done an exceptional job trying to explain to people what's really going on in this world. What on earth is happening, in fact, is the podcast that he does. Um, and I would recommend Mark Passio highly, though not necessarily his podcast, where he gets really upset sometimes and yells at you. But I would look at his documentary about natural law, the transgender movement. He has an excellent presentation on. Like Mark Passio is an acquired taste, no question, but I think he's an indisputable genius and one of the leading spiritual philosophers of our strange, strange age. So that's four people who've told me basically what I'm about to tell you. And the fifth would be Fritz Springmeier, the author of Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And I actually was very lucky to get an interview with Fritz a few months ago, and that's actually online too. You can probably find that. Maybe I'll include a link or whatever. And yeah, look, these videos are not going to be like super professionally made, and I'm not going to do cutaways to iconic movie scenes where, somebody says, I'm shocked that this is happening, or let's get out of here, or, whatever the popular memes are from popular movies to help somebody make their point. I'm not going to do any of that. It's like I'm not doing this to be famous. I'm not doing this because I want to be well known. I'm doing this, I think, because I spent most of my childhood praying that I would grow up to be a good man and a hero. And now here it's all being put in front of me, and I would rather just go move to the tropics and get high, and my conscience won't let me, So there's that. How are we going along? We're 7 minutes. I wanted these things to be less than 10 minutes. So let me cut to the chase then. What you're seeing in the world right now, and the reason it doesn't seem to make sense to you, is because it's generally been sold to you that there are two sides fighting in this war. This culture war, that's a civil war, that's World War III, that's really above all else a spiritual war. This is not like any normal war. Maybe no war has ever been that kind of war, but this war most specifically is not a war between the East and the West or anything like that. It's a different kind of war. And there aren't two sides in it. There are, I have been told, 7 like specific sides, and what we're seeing is a war among these 7 secret societies. And Chris Milligan told me what all 7 were. George Whitman years ago in Paris told me what all 7 were. And in both cases, I don't remember all 7 of them. And it's my personal feeling anyway that maybe an 8th has been added. There are a lot of, let me see, tells in the public domain that perhaps an 8th has been added. The reason I say that is because of references to like the octopus, and it takes 8 arms of the octopus to put it together. And anyway, that's another digression I'm not going to go into now. So I can't name all of the 7 top secret societies for you, but I do remember a few, and I think they're pretty obvious. One of them is the Catholic Church / Jesuits. I've heard both mentioned. Or I shouldn't say Catholic Church, pardon me, the Vatican and the Jesuits. Are they two, or are they one? Again, I don't know well enough to say. Another one, but again, Vatican / Jesuits are not Christians. They are a inverted group, maybe to make Christians look bad or whatever. But I'm just saying it's not like saying like all Christians are bad. And I want to preface that by then saying, another faction is the Zionists. And that does not mean all Jews are bad. It means that there's this offshoot of power crazed Jews. In the same way, there's an offshoot of power crazed pseudo Christians. And I'd actually say these other people are pseudo Jews. Um, so there's two. You got like the Catholic faction, you got the Jewish faction. There's an Asian faction known as the White Dragon Society. So there's three. You've got the Vatican slash Jesuits, the Zionists, and the White Dragon Society. The fourth that I recall is organized crime, and that would be La Cosa Nostra, um, or what might be known as the Mafia or the Mob. Um, and so that would be the fourth faction. And then from there, I've heard others. The Freemasons are one, so they say. I've had other people tell me the Freemasons have fallen away a bit. I don't know if that's true or not. Um, and a couple others, if I remember them. I mean, I had them all written down, but I don't even think they're all active anymore. Or they're all top 7, whatever. Anyway, so what you're seeing is a war among these 7 different factions. I see that I'm at 11 minutes now, so I'm already past the 10 minutes I wanted. Let me try to keep this thing under 15 then. These factions affiliate with each other for a common goal, but will then split up again to try to gain the upper hand once that goal has been received or achieved, pardon me. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now in the wake of the Trump election. I think you saw various factions back Trump because the alternative was just too horrific, even for them at the time, though there were factions backing Kamala Harris. And now that Trump has won, you are seeing those factions splinter again as each pursues their own means. And, before I bug out, I will tell you, and I don't mind telling you, that while I am unaffiliated with any of these 7 secret societies, I have, at least for the time being, nominally thrown my backing behind the mob or organized crime. And I don't even mind telling you, why I say this. And it comes from growing up in New Jersey, where, there's a lot of gangsters. And I might be wrong, but as both my father and my grandfather told me, the mob, by and large, plays fair with people who are not in the mob. If you get in their way, they don't just rub you out. They come and tell you hey, you gotta cut this out. And they'll usually throw you a bone, I mean, so that's one part, I've always heard the mob was fairly honorable compared to some of these other secret societies, at least in my perception. And the other thing is just a pragmatic reason. The mob runs on cash, payoffs, bribes, all that sort of stuff. The mob runs on cash. And one of the big goals of, the global takeover, whoever's running, is to get rid of cash. If they get rid of cash, it's easier to control you. But if you get rid of cash, it's a lot easier for all of this stuff that's going on with the mob. Pardon me, I'm not sure how I phrased that. If you get rid of cash, it's going to remove one of the venues in which the mob makes their money. So just pragmatically, I think we need to back the mob inside the earthly battle that's taking place. Logically, really, we shouldn't be backing anybody. And this is I don't know if this is hell itself that we live in, or if we've made it hell, and or they're trying to make it hell, and what we got is a purgatory caught between the two, because there is beauty on this planet. And you can find love. So there is goodness here. I don't know if there's any goodness in hell. But there's probably some goodness in purgatory. So that seems more likely. Um, in any event, where are we now? Okay, 15 minutes. Good. We're done. We'll move on to number 2. Thanks.